You know, it's not that often as a surgeon I look up to people. We by nature have to be pretty self-centered individuals, and I have to think about that after what I saw this morning. And our next speaker exemplifies just that. Like many of you, one of my childhood dreams was to be an astronaut. I didn't have the fireman, didn't want to be a police officer, actually didn't want to be a surgeon as well. And I guess that's a default position since I could not get into NASA. And our next speaker doesn't have that challenge. Columbia, Discovery, Endeavor, wonderful, strong names, and also chosen names for some of our shuttles that our next speaker has had the opportunity to fly. I got exposed to astronaut and cosmonaut LEROY CHIAO through some of the work I had done with NASA, trying to teach non-physicians how to provide medical care as they circled our planet at almost 18,000 miles an hour. And like many of the brave men and women I've had the opportunity to work with in the armed forces and through our space program and now the Russian and Chinese programs as well, I've been impressed by their ability to achieve what I did not think was possible. As an arrogant physician, I thought there was no way that they would be able to accomplish some of the things that it's taken me 10 and 20, sometimes 30 years to learn. I was wrong. And I think that's, again, about this empowerment and these empowering partnerships. Dr. Chiao has spent almost 230 days off our planet, almost 30 hours outside of the vehicle in spacewalks or extravehicular activities. As if that isn't enough, he's fluent in Mandarin, Russian, knows how to fly shuttles, planes, Russian spacecraft, and also working on private space enterprise. It's my extreme pleasure to introduce to you Dr. LEROY CHIAO.
Wow, thanks, Scott. Thanks for that very nice introduction. Well, welcome everyone and good morning. It's a pleasure and an honor for me to be here today at the first Alva Park TEDx experience. Really enjoyed the morning and hope to kind of continue that trend. Well, spaceflight really is quite a magical experience. I don't think there's a single astronaut or anyone else who gets up into space and doesn't feel that their life has been fundamentally somehow changed by that experience. But change doesn't happen only to the individuals who go up there. My whole thesis today is that the human spaceflight programs have arguably changed governments, the way that nations work together, and have affected, for the better, lives of individuals here on this planet. What I'd like to do today is kind of expand on that theme by telling you a little bit about how I got into the space business and then also sharing some of my adventures in space with you. Well, I grew up during the 60s, during the Cold War, during the beginning of the so-called space race, and I followed those early missions very carefully. And it really was the Apollo moon program that captured my imagination as a young boy and made me want to become an astronaut myself. I can remember like it was yesterday, my 1969 summertime. I was living in California. It was a warm day, warm afternoon. A couple of my buddies were over from school, and my father had moved our black and white TV set out to the patio and sprayed it down with water because it was kind of a warm day, and we didn't have air conditioning. And, I remember that grainy black and white TV set with the rabbit ears that we kept kind of trying to adjust and listening in to the transmissions coming back from the moon and watching the mission control center on that TV and, kind of imagining as the lander approached the surface of the moon and touched down. We heard the words from Neil Armstrong, "Tranquility Base, here the Eagle has landed." And even as a little kid, as an 8-year-old kid, I knew that the world had just changed, and I wanted to be like those guys. I wanted to be an astronaut. Hours later, watching Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin take the very first steps of any human on another planetary body, I mean, it was just, mind-blowing. And at the time, those of you in the audience who grew up at the same period that I did, you remember what it was like back then, and it was magical. And, I knew that the key to success was to do well in school and stay healthy. And of course, coming from an Asian American heritage, Asian American family, not doing well in school was not an option. So I worked very hard, and I was studying engineering, chemical engineering. Got 3 degrees in chemical engineering. I was working at the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory up in Northern California when I applied to NASA and got asked to interview and then was selected. And I put this picture up. This is kind of a little bit humorous. This is my selection picture from 1990. So we're talking about basically about 20 years and 20 pounds ago. Over the next 15 years, I would serve as a NASA astronaut. I finally got my first chance to fly on Space Shuttle Columbia in 1994, and then followed that with 2 other shuttle missions, as well as my space station mission. So all told, I had the good fortune to fly 4 times in space. On Columbia, we performed a number of different scientific investigations. In fact, we were called a space lab flight because in the back of the payload bay, instead of having a satellite or a deployable, we had a laboratory module that you can kind of think of as a precursor to the International Space Station. We spent 2 weeks working around the clock in 2 shifts and conducted over 80 different investigations. On my second mission on Space Shuttle Endeavour, the big deal for me was the first time I got to put a spacesuit on and actually go outside the vehicle and perform 2 spacewalks, testing tools and construction techniques that we would later use to build the International Space Station. After that mission, serving on the ground for a while in support roles, primarily helping to further develop tools and modifications of the spacesuit, I went on my 3rd Space Shuttle mission on Space Shuttle Discovery, and we went up to the International Space Station, which was quite small back then, and we used the robotic arm and added 2 pieces. I, again, was a part of the spacewalking team and led 2 spacewalks, 2 out of 4, to go outside and actually physically tighten bolts and made electrical connectors to bring those 2 pieces to life. We also installed the main data communication antenna on the space station. This is what we call the KU band antenna. And actually, it doesn't sound like a big sum right now, but back in the year 2000 when we flew this mission, we were a little bit worried, or not worried, but just aware. They told us this dish costs $100 million, so don't break it. After the landing of Space Shuttle Discovery, my career was a little bit at a crossroads, and was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I'd been at NASA for 10 years, and the chief astronaut invited me to join the Expedition Corps. And what this meant was no longer would I be training for 2-week shuttle missions, going up to service the space station or help build it. I would actually be training to live and work aboard the station on what turned out to be a 6.5-month flight. Now let me stop for a minute and talk about the International Space Station. This is the most audacious, most bold and complex technical project ever envisioned in space, or ever executed in space, and it's worked out really well. Imagine you've got former World War II and Cold War enemies working together on this project, and it's been such a success. And that's kind of the theme that I wanted to talk about, is that it affects the relationships of nations. These different countries come together, and even because they're working on this very visible, very expensive, and very successful project in space, it affects the relationship between these countries in different ways. And I'll kind of come back to that in a little while. It was a big deal for me because I had to, first of all, wrap my head around, can I go up and live in what basically is a series of tin cans for what turned out to be 6.5 months. That's a pretty big deal. Also, it was a big commitment because the training flow was going to be probably about 3.5 years, and I'd spend half my time in Russia. I had to learn the Russian language to pretty much a fluent level because I was going to be the co-pilot of a Russian Soyuz, and I had to work with Russian trainers. And I'd be spending 1 month in Star City, 1 month in Houston, back and forth. And back then, I was a federal employee, which meant that most of that travel, except when I could beg for an upgrade, was back in economy class. Certainly, there are several customs to learn, some of them more familiar than others, but some more subtle. And this is very important because, of course, you're forgiven and you forgive people who come from other cultures and they don't really know your customs yet, but really you've got to learn them because you want to interact with these people, you want these people to trust you, you want these people to like you so that you can work effectively. And, that's really a big deal, especially as the world is, it's a cliche, but the world is shrinking because of technology. Think about it. We've got instant communications. Everyone's got a smartphone. You can email, you can text, you can dial anyone across the world. You can get on a plane from any major city and almost overnight make it to another major city. So, you really got to start thinking more globally if you're not already. So what's wrong with this picture? Well, here in the West, nothing. But in Russia, you never, ever shake hands over a threshold. That's considered very bad luck. In fact, in Russia, when we get over there and we don't know all the customs yet, we'll do that or we'll forget, and the Russian will quickly jump inside before they shake your hand so that you don't, screw each other up. Well, speaking of good luck, another thing you don't do in countries like Russia is wish people good luck. That's considered the worst thing you can do because you're jinxing that person. As an example, you'll never see an expectant mother in Russia or in some other countries having a baby shower. That's considered, you don't give a gift. Don't give a gift to someone who's expecting before the baby is born and you find out the baby's healthy and everything's good. Well, this is Star City. This is my home away from home for the better part of almost 4 years. And a very interesting place. This looks a lot different than the Johnson Space Center, I can tell you. Got to fly on a Russian Soyuz rocket. This was really a treat. And this was also a surprise to me. And after I thought about it, it shouldn't have been a surprise. But these cultural differences transcend just food and the way people interact, things like that. It also applies to engineering and technology. I mean, you look at Russian spacecraft and Russian rockets, they look a lot different and they feel a lot different than American or Western spacecraft and rockets. But they both do the same thing. Okay? They satisfy the same requirements, get you up there safely. And when I thought more about it, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, what's the difference between a Ferrari and a Porsche? Both high-performance sports cars, but they couldn't be more different in design, in engineering, in functionality, and in feel, right? So it really does transcend all the different cultural boundaries. Got to do a couple of spacewalks in the Russian spacesuit. This was a real treat because I had never done one I'd become an expert in using American spacesuits, but I had never done one in a Russian suit before. Got to train up and do that. And of course, the view up there, the fourth time, is just as spectacular as the first time. Let me share a few views of the world. Like I said, it really is a life-changing experience to get up into space. This, of course, is New York's Manhattan Island. This is a large lake in central China called Qinghaihu, and I want to kind of direct your attention to the mountains just behind the lake, and I'll come back to that later. That's the Gobi Desert back there, and it's the Jutren launch site from where China launches their astronauts. The Finger Lakes area in upstate New York, details brought out by light snowfall. There's glaciers in Patagonia. Do you see the pyramids, the Great Pyramids right in the middle? Those literally took me about 3 months to find. I'm up there with an atlas. I knew, of course, I could see Cairo. Okay, we're flying over Cairo. They should be over here. Where are they? I'm taking all these pictures and blowing them up at night on my computer, zooming in, looking for these things. I finally found them, and when I did, I could identify that little notch in the green part, this road, that road, and from then on, when we flew over Cairo in daylight, I could pick it out and I could see these two tiny little dots. This is a desert area in Egypt, some interesting textures. This is an area in Ukraine. I'm not sure what the Ukrainians were up to, but this is about the most unnatural green you can imagine. Made for a very interesting photo, though, very, very pretty photo. This is the Sahara Desert in Algeria, and one mistake rookie flyers often make is we'll fly over a desert area and they'll say, oh, this is just sand, this is boring, I'm going to go get something to eat. But really, you take a telephoto out and you look at the sand dunes. It's very intricate patterns, and again, Mother Nature just showing her beauty. This is one of my favorites. This is Lake Nasser in Egypt, and this is, at the moment, precise angles lined up where the sun was reflecting off the surface of the water into the lens of the camera. I could watch as the Earth rotated, as the sun kind of marched across different bodies of water. I got ready, and just as it hit Lake Nasser, I was able to capture it. Well, the International Space Station, as I mentioned, it was just a great focal point for all these different countries to come together and work on a common project and better relations, frankly, between all these other countries. As I mentioned, in 2003, China became only the third nation in the world able to launch her own astronauts into space. Shortly after Yang Liwei flew his first flight, there were some very public statements by the Chinese expressing a desire to join the International Space Station program. And in the intervening years between 2003 and now, there have been at least two other, kind of calls by the Chinese suggesting that they would like to join the ISS program. And unfortunately, to me anyway, and each time they've been rebuffed by the United States for different political reasons. Now, in January of 2007, you may remember China conducted an anti-satellite weapon test, a live test, which was a pretty big deal. They launched a kinetic kill vehicle, and they took out one of their old weather satellites. This was a big deal because it was obviously an aggressive test, and it showered some orbital debris around. Basically, this test was widely condemned by most nations around the world. And, I had to stop and think about this and say, you know what? What if China had been a partner in the ISS? Would they really have done this test? I mean, think about it. I think they probably wouldn't have. You know, it's hard for me to imagine Russia as a major partner in the ISS going off and doing something like this. So that's another example of how powerful collaboration and cooperation between countries in one project can affect an outcome in a different area. 2 years ago, I was part of a White House appointed committee to review the U.S. human spaceflight plans and to basically put together option paths for the new administration. One of our biggest findings was that the international framework that we created to do the ISS program should be expanded, has been so successful in many ways, and should be expanded and applied to future exploration programs. And by working together, we can solve a lot of these problems and go farther, I think. You know, basically the limiting factor in spaceflight is the effect on the negative effect on human bodies in space for long duration. And that's really the reason, the limiting factor, why we can't send astronauts out farther and for longer duration. What I'd like to do is talk about one concrete example of how work in space can affect individual lives on the ground. You've all heard Dr. Dulchovsky say a few words earlier. Dr. Dulchovsky, Scott Dulchovsky, head of surgery, chief of surgery here at the Henry Ford Hospital, was also principal investigator on my favorite experiment on the ISS, which was the ultrasound telemedicine investigation. And what we did, you know, I'm not a medical doctor, but Scott and his team were able to train Salatin Sharipov and me up in just a few hours to recognize what a good ultrasound image is and what a bad ultrasound image is, and learn the pattern recognition in what just looks like, you know, a bunch of splotches of darkness and dark and light. And we were able to image each other's internal organs, bones, teeth, and even eyes from space, being guided remotely with a voice and data link to the ground. And the very neatest thing about this, you know, besides the fact that this is something we're going to need as we go longer and farther from the Earth, you know, you undoubtedly will bring a physician along as part of the crew, but that person's not going to know everything. So you're going to need techniques like that to link back to experts on the ground to help diagnose problems. But the very neatest thing about this is Scott and his team have applied this to life on Earth and have, in concrete ways, you can pick out specific examples how they've made life better for individuals on the ground. They've been to remote places, remote areas, in places like Madagascar and Honduras. They've imaged you know, pregnant women who are having some difficulty, and with the images that are coming back live to the hospital here, they're able to make a determination in real time. This is not a significant problem, it's okay, or yeah, this is a problem, that person needs to get on the mule and get, you know, the 2 to 3 days over to the hospital right away. Well, when I look back at my 4 space flights, my 15-year career at NASA, I'm most rewarded in knowing that I was part of a program that helped better life on Earth. It helped, I think, improve relations between nations and also help some specific individuals in very specific ways. Here we are in the Soyuz spacecraft coming back down from the 6.5 months aboard the space station. This is what the Soyuz looks like. It was really a treat getting to fly on this spacecraft and having flown on 3 shuttle missions. We didn't land on a runway, that's for sure. We came down with a big thump in the steppes of Kazakhstan. All the shock-absorbing systems work, so that, you know, so I'm here. But that's what it looks like. You come down pretty hard. And then, as sometimes happens, we tipped over. That's another story. But we were no worse for wear. The rescue crews were right on top of us. They got us out probably about 15 minutes or so after we touched down. And, you know, I remember when they opened the hatch, what I smelled was muddy grass. You know, that doesn't sound like a very pleasant smell, but to me it was the best smell at the time that I could have had, because the sense of smell is the strongest memory trigger, and instantly a flood of memories of being back on the Earth came into my head, and I just felt in my gut I knew we were home. After a quick ceremony in Kazakhstan, they put us back on the airplane, flew us back to Star City. We were reunited with our families and our loved ones. And finally, this is the photo I wanted to leave you with. This, of course, is the moon. The moon inspired me to want to become an astronaut, inspired my generation, basically. The space program inspired my generation to go out and do great things. The first and foremost reason a country gets into the human spaceflight business is for national prestige. And there's this intangible thing of how you're proud of your country, you're proud of what your country's doing, and it inspires the young. It inspires young people to go out, not necessarily in space or in technical fields, but it inspires them to dream and inspires them to go out and do all all they can do and really follow their passions. And that's the advice I give to every group that I talk to, no matter how old or how young you are. It's never too early or too late to think about what you want to do with the rest of your life. Thank you very much.